One. Okay, good evening. It is 10 after 5 here. Call the meeting to order. Just getting going a couple minutes late. Start with the adoption of the agenda. Start with administration. Any extras on the agenda?
There's no changes from an administrative perspective, Mr. Reeve.
Council, anything extra from council? Not seeing any. Councillor Wilhelm?
I'll motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you, sir. With that, I'll call the motion. All in question, or call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Adoption of the minutes. We have 2 meeting minutes. Council meeting will start of August 14th, 2024. If anybody sees anything there, Councillor Dean.
Seeing none, I'll move that we adopt the minutes of council meeting from the 14th of August, 2024.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. And we have a special meeting for July 30th, 2024 meeting minutes. Anybody see anything there?
I can do that.
Councillor Dean.
Move that council adopts the minutes from the special council meeting from July 30th, 2024.
Thank you, Councillor. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. And we'll start with our first delegation here. We have at 5:05, it is a closed session. If I can get a motion to go into closed session under Flip 17, please. Councillor Kuchen?
I'll move that we go into closed session under point 17.
Thank you very much. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? We are in closed session at 5:11. Coming out of this one here for 12-1, Councillor Burrows, there's a motion.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a motion that council accept Human Edge Global CAO Recruitment presentation as information.
Thank you, Councillor. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Moving back up into new business, 9.1, the Wobbly roller purchase.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. County currently has 2 Wobbly carts in our possession. One's in working order, one is not. This request is to replace the existing non-working unit, which will eventually be salvaged. Wobbly roller carts can be used for various different tasks when it comes to road work, to help with compaction. Since the need for wobbly cart is continuous for each of our shops, it's best that we still maintain a fleet of 2. A decent used unit can be purchased for around $20,000, and they tend to last for a long time with minimal amount of maintenance. It is therefore administration's request to council that council approves $20,000 towards the purchase of 1 wobbly roller cart in the 2024 capital budget from equipment reserve, so that we can start looking for one. End of construction season is kind of the right time to look for second-hand units. Thank you very much.
One question I have on this to administration. We've had a few other items that have come through that have been coming out of the equipment reserve. Do we know what we're looking at in the equipment reserve for a total if we end up pulling another 20,000 up?
Through the chair, I do not know. When I wrote this RFD, my assumption is we are not creating a major dip, because last council meeting I did take RFD to council for surplusing vehicles, we do have money coming in. I wasn't too concerned.
Just to kind of curious, just where, and again, even a personal, we can look it up another time, but I am curious where we are sitting as far as valuing that reserve.
To the chair, we can look into the info and provide an email to council.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else from council? Seeing Councilor Coogan,
I'll make a motion that council approves 20,000 for one Wobbly roller cart purchase into the 2024 capital budget with funding coming from the equipment reserve.
thank you, Councilor. Any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any, I'll call the question, all in favor? And that is carried. 9.2, the municipal rebrand cancellation.
So, Mr. Reeve, I'll start this. Corinne may want to, or would you want to present it, Corinne?
No, go ahead.
Corinne may want to add some comments, and, you know, clearly, the opportunity when the timing is right to rebrand is an important exercise that can be undertaken by a community. And at the current time, though, that we have to be realistic about the challenges that we are facing, and in an effort to manage those workloads and be more focused on the council priorities and our fiscal situation, et cetera, staff capacity is better directed to address those initiatives. So that is why we are recommending the rebrand project be canceled at this time, and it certainly, when some of these other issues have been further dealt with, it can be reintroduced at that time. So there's the process of the returning that part of the grant to the province, and then we would return the funding that came out of our operating budget to working capital. So that's the purpose of the two motions dealing with this rebranding initiative.
Councilor Wilhelm?
Through the chair to administration, so, and, because I know that there's been probably a significant amount of work done on it, like it wasn't maybe not completed at this point, so it's all like getting scrapped, or is it gonna be utilized if we pull this back up in the future? We must have some sunk cost into this program already.
Corinne, are you comfortable responding to?
Yeah, certainly. Through the chair to Councilor Wilhelm, there has not been any work done on the project.
Okay.
The project was set to commence mid-September. The communications plan, which is paused because of capacity on staff, is still in the works, so there's been no work. So there's no loss of cost, project work, anything. It has not been started.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, back to council. So Councilor Dean and Councilor Gross.
Through the chair to Corinne, the communication plan, was it embedded in that rebranding? Or is it stand apart?
Through the chair to Councilor Dean, it is a standalone project.
Okay, good, thanks.
Councilor Gross?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I'll go ahead and make the motion that council approve the cancellation of the municipal rebrand project and return the NRED grant funding of $62,500 to the government of Alberta.
Thank you very much. Motion on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any, call the question, all in favor? That's carried. We have a second motion. Councilor Dean,
Move that council directs administration to transfer $125,000 approved municipal rebrand funds from the 2024 operating budget to working capital.
thank you, Councilor. Any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any, I'll call the question, all in favor? And that's carried. 9.3 RMA survey for the police funding model.
And Mr. Reeve and members of council, the intention here is just to get some input from council with respect if there's certain parts of the concerns around the police funding model that you wish to have highlighted. Then we'll take any of those highlights you've got and we'll work administratively to complete the survey on this very important issue, given all the things impacting policing, and certainly another concerning and important matter around this whole policing question is what's happened to costs. And when the province introduced the police funding model in 2021, our cost for RCMP were round numbers, $165,000. And this year, we just got the bill, it's $478,000. Now, there's been some offset because there's a lesser contribution to the policing under the town of Whitecourt. But, I mean, obviously, this is a significant expenditure. So providing input into the surveys to assist RMA in advocating on our behalf is important. So we'd want you to highlight any specific issues you have, and then we'll work to shape the response.
Okay, just wondering, proceed, Councilor Rose.
So, just for history's sake, I think it was municipalities under 5,000 were required to pay for policing in Alberta, right?
Right.
So, we were part of an agreement with the town, which saw us doing an enhanced policing agreement under the ICF, prior to the ICF, under agreements that we had, where we would pay for certain portions. And that worked out to be about $500,000 a year, roughly, that went directly to the town, but added to those positions. As a result of that, we kind of got to phase in our police contributions to the police funding model, so that's might be why you're seeing the previous bill not being quite so high. And we knew the end bill was going to be roughly that $500,000 mark again. Under the old model. The new model is most likely going to be a lot more money, And I think one of the things that we need to know under the police funding model, and this is one of the weaknesses under the system that we have right now, is if your full crew at an RCMP station is, let's say, 21, you're paying for 21 positions. If they're temporarily down 2, permanently down 3, looking for 1, we're still paying exactly the same amount of money. And there is no accounting for any of those positions that are either temporarily not filled or permanently not filled or anything. And there's no reporting mechanism on it, there's no anything. So we get a bill, whether the positions are filled or not. To me, it doesn't seem like it's a good system that way. I think, I don't have a problem with paying for services that you get, but services that you don't, I don't know why you'd have to pay for them, so.
Righto.
Through the chair, to council and to administration, further to Councilor Burrow's comment, when I go through this survey and I'm trying to answer these questions, the bottom line for me is I want good service at a reasonable price. And nowhere in this survey is that question being addressed. And to me, that's probably the biggest one, because we've been told consistently that our detachments haven't been at capacity. And it wasn't until 2 years ago that I realized we were paying for it. So this survey has some good questions and will provide good direction, but to me, that's something that's missing. And I think there's an other, or if there isn't another, I think that should be in our comments.
Peter?
Yeah, I just wanted to understand a little better as well, the fact that we have police representation both on the east side and the west side, but different divisions. And both of those divisions haven't been staffed. And we don't even have any kind of an understanding what kind of a service is provided on either side with understaffed. And a good example was an incident that happened about a month and a half ago where it was called in theft and attempted vehicular assault, and they couldn't respond because they didn't have anybody in the office. So what are we paying for? So I don't see that in this funding model. I don't see how that works.
So just question to administration, procedurally, given we have this questionnaire or the survey, and a deadline to get this back, what would be procedurally the best way for us to do this currently? Go through this question by question, or have each council fill this out, give it back, and kind of give the average of the answers?
Well, we'll be directed by council. If council members want to go through and individually complete them, you could. The other approach is that you share, as there's been tonight, a couple highlights of concerns, and subsequent tonight, if you have a further concern, if you want to email that to us, we could incorporate it. So whichever way council wants to go, we can make either way work.
Councillor Dean, I think it was your hand going up there.
Yeah, I was just coming back to where we would fit that question that Councillor Burrows brought up. And 25 says what measures should be used to ensure the police funding model is accountable to rural municipalities. Please select all that apply, and then there's another. So that vacancy funding inequity is not captured in here, but it could be in the other.
A lot of the first few questions talking about our municipalities' concerns and stuff are obvious around, in my opinion, this is a provincial cost that, or, it's a federal cost put down on the province, is put down to us, that we don't even get to come to the table to have a discussion on, or around the viability or how we're gonna fund it, or what we need to do to fund it. And on this end, the only reality we can do is raise taxes when we get the notice. We don't get to have those discussions around what we're paying for, or
Right.
what it looks like.
So question number 10, how your municipality responded to increased costs. We really haven't yet, right? We knew these costs were increasing, but we've only got one mechanism, and that's to increase property tax. And so that message, our residents need to hear that.
Well, I would think that the other one is to reduce the service, and I don't think that's what they want here. It's the only two things, right?
Councilor Rose?
I would actually say that our response has been to increase taxes because we've and we'll have to do it again. Because like I said, I get the feeling this is, like, when we go to the 2025 budget, I would double this number. And we might make it out unscathed, but it's gonna be interesting. And there's another, this isn't directly with regard to the funding model, but there's another thing, and maybe I'll bring it up in my reports and make a motion to reach out. But with the latest comment from the GOA that they're gonna run the Alberta Police through the sheriffs, and the RCMP will no longer be, what relationship do we have with the sheriffs? Zero. So we better start building one with them and reaching out and getting on that. So I'll bring that up later in reports, but.
And to kind of questions 13, 14, this comes down to other conversations we've had around information on, we'll say, how do we get the information out around cost increase and stuff on the police funding model or the police service levels. Or we get updates quarterly from the staff sergeants for the reports and where they're at, and it comes to a council report. But as far as information regarding the cost of it to residents, we don't even get to see really the conversation on how those costs come out. It's based off of an assessment, whatever, from the province, and it's just delivered to us. It's just another requisition. So I don't, for number 13, where it says, how does your municipality communicate information regarding the cost of the program to residents? It's kind of hard to really describe, other than the other part, because it is a requisition that's handed to us. It's kind of hard for us to describe something or talk about the increases and stuff to the cost when the cost and the billing portion of that, it's out of our hands. We're just the collector. And it comes down to some of the conversations we've had around other requisitions. It's the province, we'll use the AER as an example, state that they're not a bill collector for the municipalities when they're behind, yet we're the bill collector for the province for their end. So I guess around the table from council, how do we kind of had a bunch of discussions on this. Do we want administration to fill this out and file it back to us through email before it goes in? Or do we want to go through this page by page? Councilor Rose?
I would think that if, based on the discussion we've had here today, I'm thinking administration could probably encapsulate what we've touched on here. Fill it out, shoot it up to us, and if we have any comments, that would be the most expedient way to do it.
That's good, council.
Anything on this side of the table, any comments?
Sense to me.
Well, just further, I agree with that strategy, but further to the idea or the concept of us being bill collectors, at some point, when we establish our mill rate and residents are asking why it is, we need to identify these cost inflation and explain that we really have no control over this. This is very similar to the Alberta school requisition. We're just given a bill and we have to pay it.
Mhm.
But I don't think most residents are aware of that.
Well, and that definitely comes out every spring when the tax notices go out. We have conversations with residents when they take a look at the increase, the total increase at the bottom of the bill, aside from the municipalities increase, which is the smaller section on the side. After you add in the requisitions and the increase in the province, it does make for some uncomfortable conversations sometimes trying to, I guess, explain where the increases come when it's something that you don't have control at the municipal level. Councillor Cogan?
Yeah, just to add to Councillor Dean's comment there is that it's a requisition. And normally, in any kind of a billing process, we would know what we're paying for, but we really don't. And I think that is the difficult thing, is how do you tell your residents that, yeah, we're paying for policing, and you don't even have an ability to say, what the service level is. There's, and that's, to me, is a difficulty, and yeah, I don't know how you put that into the survey, but
Councillor Dean?
I want to come back to this funding anomaly that you expressed. Has the RMA worked with the province or the RCMP to understand why that anomaly is in? Like, it doesn't make sense to the average person that you're overpaying for something.
Yeah, I actually asked that question. It wasn't in quite the right area to ask that question, but we continue to ask that question under the police funding model, and it's where the GOA is going on policing right now is kind of difficult to understand. So, like, to my understanding, they think that the federal government wants to get out of doing contract policing. There's a large portion of federal money that goes into the RCMP that stands up that force, and then they kind of rent it out to the provinces, and that's contract policing. But it's subsidized at the federal level fairly heavily. So from what I understand, there's signals that the feds don't want to do this anymore, and they want the provinces to stand up their own police forces. Why the province is doing this particular thing on the funding model, I don't know. And we never have gotten an answer on that. And I don't think you're going to see it until the new police funding model comes out, which I don't think is going to be 2025. It's probably going to be 2026.
But this anomaly has been in effect for years, right?
Yes.
It's not a recent thing.
No.
And so, historically, if the detachment was supposed to be staffed with 10 and we had 8, we paid for 10. And that's been going on for 25, 30, 50 years. And that makes no sense. And that's like, who do you even ask that question to?
Yeah.
And we had, was it Ted Saturday here? We asked that question to.
And Sergeant Dodds.
And Sergeant Dodds, and the same thing. And they said it's just, decisions past them. They've been asked that before too, and even at the RCMP level, they said they can't explain it. It's
But that's an head scratcher.
And to be fair, it's not an RCMP thing. It's a provincial
Yeah.
government of Alberta thing. Like this whole conversation I get a little uncomfortable with because I don't want the RCMP thinking that, this is on them or anything. I think for the most part, we've had really good relationships with the RCMP. We've had great service from the RCMP. They've been a fantastic police force. We're moving into something on the funding side here now, so this doesn't have anything to do with the policing. And I just want to put that out there to make sure that people understand, but, this really has to do with the amount of, the value for dollar that we're getting, that we're paying the province for that contract police.
So perhaps the next time we have our MLAs at our meeting, we can add this as a question to ask and task them with explaining it. Because I couldn't, if a resident heard this conversation and said, hey, what were you guys talking about? I wouldn't be able to give them a good answer. And hopefully our MLA will.
Any other questions, comments? Councilor Cook? No? So with that, does somebody want to make a motion to move this for administration to bring back to us?
Sure, I can
Councilor Dean?
move that council directs administration to complete the RMA survey to assist in assessing the impact of the police funding model.
Thank you. Motion on the floor. Any discussion on that motion? With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. 9.4, the opportunity to meet with Minister Adrishan at the 2024 RMA.
So, Mr. Reeve and members of council, we've been advised of this opportunity to ask for a meeting with Minister Dreeshen. And administratively, of course, council's familiar with this issue, but we think we need to broach the minister with respect to this STIP funding grant for the airport runways, because we know we've got a significant expenditure coming up there. And one other different idea that was identified today is that there's starting to be some development of rest areas that kind of have some commercial services in conjunction with them. And so one of the ideas brought up today was, Woodlands County with the amount of Highway 43 we've got going through our community, that there might be some potential. So that one's a little bit different, and actually Jeff had identified where that's occurring on another part of Highway 2, I think you said. So those were a couple things that were, one for sure being the STIP grant and the airport runways, and the second one would be optional, or other suggestions that you have in advancing our request for a meeting.
Before we go, if you want to possibly elaborate, Jeff, on
Through the chair to council, north of Red Deer, Highway 2, there has been some proposals of developing a commercial rest area that's more of a European style, that it's more than the current rest areas that you see on the highway, which is only providing a spot for truckers to complete their logbook and take the water break. But by inviting more restaurants and commercial establishments to it, so I mentioned that to the CEO today. Maybe that's something, given 43 is a trans-American network, there may be some benefit from a long-term commercial development perspective to bring more business into the area. That's just an idea.
Thank you. For me, a couple of things. Obviously, we got to talk about STIP funding and the airport are the two top priorities for me. Anybody else? Councilor Willem?
Through the chair, I guess to everybody, I think that idea is awesome. I think you would need to be kind of fleshed out a little bit before we brought something to the minister. Might be something that we push down to the ACDEP committee or something like that to look at land viability for something like that. Yeah, it's a great idea. It's awesome they came up with it, but we just need to flesh that idea out a bit more. STIP funding, I think, is pretty important, and especially around why was our application denied in this last round of STIP funding, when there was clearly some other less needy municipalities getting the money.
Councillor Dean?
Do we know, through the chair, sorry, to Mr. Zhang, do we know when the next intake is for STIP funding?
Through the chair to Councillor Dean, typically November 30th is the cutoff for each year for STIP funding applications.
So do we have an app, like, basically take that one that we used and put it out there again?
Through the chair to Councillor Dean, it's generally a better idea to kind of brainstorm what went wrong in the previous one, why we didn't get it first before sending the same application in. Otherwise, you may get the same response. I think maybe CEO will correct me. I think there's benefiting meeting with the MLAs. Maybe there's some words of wisdom that can come out of the MLAs, help us be successful the next time.
Anything else, council? Any other ideas?
Yeah, I'd love to hear from the minister. You know, we got a letter back that said the program was oversubscribed. So that's pretty much Dear John.
Yeah, the other, Mr. Chair, I would suggest we'll try to reach out to some of the senior departmental staff that make some of those decisions and see if they will provide us with any insights, because sometimes those insights are helpful in reshaping the request in a little bit different manner so it better fits their criteria. So we'll work on that, and so if we can just confirm if those are our two topics and some indication. I think they've also asked for an indication of who might attend. So if you give some idea who would possibly be able to attend, we can let them know that too.
Definitely. So I think we're still tied into trying to get some funding for the airport. There's still, whether it's through the STIP funding or if it's just extra funding, but we need to have another discussion around the infrastructure needs at the airport. As for Councillor Wilhelm?
Through the chair to council, I guess, and administration, if we're gonna focus on specifically funding at the airport, I'm not sure, has this conversation had with that ministry about the importance of the Whitecourt Airport
Oh, yeah.
with regards to firefighting,
We brought
with
lots
Minister
of
Dreeshen specifically?
Yep. We had the initial meeting with Minister Bowen to get support from that ministry. And then we had Plus Forestry was also involved there, local forestry, and then we moved that with our MLAs here. It wasn't, Martin was able to make that one, but it was,
And I can.
yeah, Van Dyken, and we had that meeting with Minister Dreeshen in his office and his cabinet. And it was a fairly lengthy meeting. I believe that our administration, Andre, I think, was fantastic with the information that he provided us and the brochures that he brought along with the information pamphlets for the minister outlining our airport and the needs that have been identified by HM Merrill. We did have a copy of that report that we also provided to the minister's office. So I do believe that, you know, from our end, at least in the meetings that we had, that we came as prepared as I think we could have with the information behind us and the discussions that we had. And we did have, like I said, the support from our MLA there, at least one of our MLAs. Martin Long was in session, so unfortunately he didn't come, but giving our municipality, we have two great resources to pull from when we need it, so. Councilor Dean?
Yeah, and just further to that, I mean, this isn't new information, but the tone and the mood of those meetings was very productive. There seemed to be a really good understanding from both ministries of the strategic importance of the airport in fighting wildfire, and the fact that the runway upgrades were essentially required because of the bombers. Like, that was really the only reason why we needed to make these extensive rehab to the runways, and that message was delivered succinctly as Reeve Cush said, and it was received. The head nodding and, you know, the verbal communication coming back to us was that, yeah, they got it. They understood that there's a disproportionate share of our operating budget to go to allow those bombers to land there. And they, I left those meetings thinking, okay, perfect. That they understand it. We're going to go to the top of the pile. And when we got that letter, I was shocked, just shocked.
Any other comment on this? No, with that, if I can get a motion then to, I guess, request the meeting with Minister Dreesen with the airport and STIP funding. Somebody wants to make the motion? Councillor Wilhelm?
I'll motion the council directs administration to request a meeting with Minister Dreesen at the 2024 RMA Fall Convention with an agenda that includes the discussion on the STIP funding and its importance for the CYZU airport.
Thank you.
Do you also want on that agenda this, and yes, it's economic development, we do some work ahead, brought this concept of a integrated commercial service area and rest stop?
If we can get that together in time,
Okay.
and can review it beforehand, absolutely.
Okay, so that'd be a second if we can get it pulled together.
Go ahead, Tom.
With regard, if that's gonna go on the motion, can I just get a brief idea? So basically, you're talking, and I think I've seen these things in Europe, but they're kind of a small portion that's set aside, chunk of land, with I don't know who would own it, the government of Alberta, I guess, would own it. And then you've got private companies from, restaurants and things like that coming in and setting up shop in those areas.
Through the chair to Councillor Burrows, yes, restaurants, gas stations, all kind of services, they become if the province would sell the land to those entities, then those people become ratepayers to the county, and that's how counties generate revenue. It's kind of a new thing in Alberta. I don't recall seeing too many similar setups in Alberta, but what got us talking about this idea was the gasoline alley in Red Deer County. It's how it started developing from the 80s. It's kind of not exact same idea, but it's essentially the county tried to set a portion of land out for future development based on the highway.
One question I have toward is just Marathorpe tried doing something similar, and now I understand, we'll say from a entrance and kind of exit, the whatever on it, it's not, say the easiest for individuals coming up having to go down 22 to come back to it, but they tried setting up something similar, kind of as a build it and they will come, and nobody's come. I just would hate to do something, push something, and not to say that's not a bad idea, or maybe, if we look at partnerships with the, around the casino area or whatever, they have something anyways, whatever, like we might be able to do something with it. I would hate to kind of put the cart before the apple on this and have a discussion with the minister. I think from our end, we have a pile of information that we gotta try to flush out first. That would just be my hesitancy. Go ahead, Jeff.
To the chair, we can certainly take to the Economic Development Committee for further discussion, and don't put on the agenda for now.
Yeah, I would, that would just be my suggestion, but Councillor Wilhelm?
Through the chair to administration. Yeah, I agree. I guess my previous point was, I think that there's merit in the idea, and it should be fleshed out. But I think if you push it to the Ec Dev committee, where they can do some feasibility on it as well, working with you as well, because you clearly know what, kind of a framework of how that could work. Because it's a pretty short amount of time between now and then to come up with something, to lay the groundwork for something we would actually want to present to the minister. We could do it in the spring or something like that, the spring RMA if we needed to.
So with that, there is a motion on the floor, and just to verify, it's just for the STIP funding for CYZU.
That's council's decision.
Okay, Councillor Wilhelm, and just for clarification.
That was a motion.
Okay, so clarification, motion on the floor for RMA visit with Minister Dreesen to discuss STIP funding and the importance for the CYZU. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing any, call the question, all in favor? Okay, that one's carried.
Just to read, the next question would be if you could give us some idea, otherwise some idea of who would be attending.
Last time we did the meeting was the Reeve, our airport, community
Advisory
chair, and Councillor Burrows, just giving his involvement and knowledge of airports, which is why we brought him along. And did we, I don't think we had the deputy Reeve in those, did we?
No, it was just you three.
I think it was just us three, Director of Infrastructure and the CAO. And then we put out the invite to our MLAs to come and provide some muscle and back us up if we needed.
Okay, thank you, that's very helpful.
Okay, moving down to 11.1, council reports and questions. Given you're over here in your own, I'll start with Councilor Burrows.
Okay. I've just been dealing with lots of road issues. We know that the old Terry Loop, and we're gonna see some information on that later, so some consternation around that. Attended the JUPA signing agreement with Councillor Dean and Reeve Cush. That's really all I've been focused on in the last little while. I guess the other thing I was looking at was our, do we have a I guess this is a question, would be a question for the CAO, do we have a traffic bylaw when it comes to setting speed limits and things within the municipality? I know there was a policy, and I got quoted a policy number for it, but then I looked in the policy, it doesn't seem to be up on our website, I couldn't find it.
Typically, you would have a traffic bylaw, but I haven't had occasion to seek that out at this point. I don't know if Corinne can help us at
Okay,
all.
Through the
Oh,
chair,
Corinne can
Councillor
help us.
Burrows, we do have a traffic bylaw that identifies how speed limits are set within Woodlands County.
Okay.
And without having the bylaw in front of me, to my knowledge, that is cited as at the discretion of the CAO.
Okay. Just when we're done, I'll just grab the number of the traffic bylaws.
Sorry, out of curiosity, is that the one for down at my end? The one that we went on that road?
No,
No,
this is something else. I'm getting a request to lower a speed limit in a subdivision. And then he was mentioning that, and then the other day when I drove out to the airport, because I drive that, I go to the airport so often, I often don't pay any attention to the signs. There's a 30-kilometer-an-hour zone in the airport, which seems weird. So I'm just trying to get that figured out.
Okay.
And I guess the two things that I'd like to put on our radar is that trying to start up a relationship with the sheriffs. And I know administration's just saturated right now. I don't even want to make a motion on this right now. I just want to bring this up to council so that everybody understands that at the moment, we don't have that relationship with the sheriffs. And I think if that's how the police force is going to be stood up in the future, then I think we need to start reaching out and start trying to build that and put it on our radar as a strategic direction in the future. The second thing is, and this kind of, what twigged me to this was the rebranding pause based on capacity and based on finances as well. I'd like to have a discussion about our FCM membership. We have there's a bit of money that goes into the FCM membership and then attending to it, and I think a lot of members have been there. I don't know if we're getting enough value out of that necessarily, and I'll leave it up to council as to how they want me to approach this, whether you want to have a discussion about it at a GNP meeting, but I also don't want to miss the deadline for renewal. And I can't remember when the deadline for renewal for FCM is, for FCM membership. But I just don't know that we're getting bang for our buck out of it. And right now, every dollar counts, and I mean, it always counts. So I'd like to have a discussion about that. So if council wants to put that in front of a future agenda for the governance and priorities, I can make that motion or proceed however you guys want to proceed.
No, I am not against having a discussion on that membership.
Okay, so if you're okay, then I'll make the notice of motion that we at a future governance and priorities meeting, add the item of FCM membership to our agenda.
Thank you. I'll call the question then. All in favor? Anything else?
No, sorry, I'm good, unless anyone has a question.
Okay, any other questions, comments for Councilor Gross? Not seeing any. Councilor Coogan?
Okay, on 14th of August, halfway or most of the way through our regular council meeting, I had a meeting with the Council of Big Lakes on our RETA initiative. It was a really interesting meeting. They are very, very interested in starting some kind of an economic development strategy out of the High Prairie, Big Lakes area. The reason being is that currently the CAO runs the economic development department off the corner of his desk with no experience, and they're just got hit with an $8 million no tax, much similar as Woodlands did a number of years ago, and so they are starting to understand the importance of diversity and stuff like that. So we had a really good conversation. They were part of the engagement session last February at Eagle River, and so we're reaching out now to all of those, I think, 15 or 17 different municipalities and communities that were involved in that discussion to try to build this regional economic development alliance into something that's a lot different and a lot more flexible and reactive to the needs of municipalities than the current ones are. It boiled down to the final conversation, which was how do we revitalize our rural municipalities? Then on the 17th of, I believe it was 17th of August, Jeremy and Al came down for the hoedown, and we did a little candy throwing and shaking hands and stuff. It was a really good event, and I was supposed to give you guys a personal thank you for coming over from a number of the residents. It was good to see you guys over there. So, then on the 21st of August, we had our Ag Service Board field visit and audit, which is something they do every 5 years in our municipality or with municipalities, and it's just to make sure that I guess that we're doing our job as a service board, managing the things that we're supposed to manage under the Ag Service Board Act. On August 30th, I was in Strathcona, met with our ClearThink consultants on an NRED grant and the possibilities of interfacing the current emissions and energy grant, where we're trying to build some workshops around and interfacing them with the agri-food sector, because there's a real deficiency there, and it's just part of the way that we're trying to change how growth operates. We're a bit concerned about the way the provincial government has decided to treat the northern rural RETAs. I see that RMA has a grant to do some of the work that project development work that we would probably be involved in, and it kind of dilutes not only the expertise, but it really changes the dynamic for the northern rural RETAs, who are smaller, have completely different challenges, and it actually in the development of the Central Corridor RETAs and probably Alberta Hub would be the furthest north, there is some benefit there, but we found that it really is going to be challenging for the developing REITs in the north, who have really been funded to fail for the last 15 years, are going to meet this challenge. I think we can, because we're changing our direction completely, and we just don't have the administrative capacity to do the things that are proposed. And then I guess the next one was the 10th of September. We had an Ag Service Board meeting. We had our wild boar specialist come out with some of the trappers, and they're taking on that challenge. And I think we have a little bit of life there again, even though it is a program that's, I'm worried is going to be downloaded onto the municipalities again, because it's written into the act that we're responsible for that. And yet the provincial government was responsible for actually licensing these facilities where these hogs escaped from. So it's one of those things that we're trying to do advocacy, or we're proposing to figure out how we're going to advocate to have the provincial government do more there than what they are. Currently, Alberta Port is involved in that. And one of the things that came up in some conversations is when we have that CAN4 meeting the managers thing, it was asked if there's a possibility of a cost sharing agreement with the scale they have up there, because the Ag Service Board has been requested to put a scale in, and we do have a scale that they use annually there. And it would be nice to have a conversation with management to see if there would be some kind of a share agreement that we could do, rather than, have the investment in the scale. And that is pretty well it for me.
Any questions for Councillor Guggen? None? Councillor Dean?
So summer's over, I guess, and meeting activity is ramping up a little bit. As Councillor Colkin mentioned, I was at the Hamlet Hoedown, the parade. It was a lot of fun. Love seeing all those little kids. That's truly a special event within our county, that Hamlet Hoedown. Those organizers do a great job with that event. Later that day, when I returned to Whitecourt, I met with two representatives from the Whitecourt Ag Society who are taking some preliminary steps in potentially acquiring additional land to create some riding trails out by the Ag Hall, back towards the river. So they just wanted to show me the area they were looking at and put it on our radar. So they will be coming forth with a little more detailed plan and perhaps some costs that we can look at budget time. On the 19th, I represented, along with councillors Wilhelm and Williams and Reeve Cush, represented the county at the Anthony Gordon Golf Tournament. And it was a beautiful day. It was a long round, 7.5 hours on the golf course, so it was fun though, and a great opportunity to network and share news for anybody that's out there. On the 21st, as Councillor Colkin said, I attended that same Ag Service Board meeting where we were. I would say that Dawn Fortin and her staff did a great job in ensuring that we were in compliance with all the regulatory statutes according to that legislation. And on the 5th, along with Reeve Cush and Councillor Burrows, I attended the JUPA signing, and it was interesting. There was an organization there, a Francophone school board. So they're headquartered out of Edmonton. And I hadn't heard of the organization before, so there was considerable conversation about who they were and who they represented. And who they represent are people whose family were educated in French, who have a constitutional right to educate their children in French. So it was a good learning opportunity for us. They currently have not had any requests from this area, but the Whitecourt area is encompassed in the area that they look after. So, and then on the 10th, that was yesterday, I attended the Ag Service Board meeting as well. And one of the stats that I found really interesting about the wild boar trapping program, I'll probably get these numbers a little bit wrong, but somewhere on the order of 145 pigs were trapped in Alberta last year. So, and 138 of them were in our county. So it speaks to the fact that, you know, we're ahead of the problem, if you will, or we're trying to get ahead of the problem, but we certainly have a situation that we need to deal with. So that stat was enlightening for me. And that's it.
Any questions for Councillor Keen? Councillor
And
Cohen?
just to add to what's happened in Woodlands is the border between Laxey and Woodlands and I can't remember what it was, but it was like 60% of the hogs that have been trapped in Alberta, I think that was the percentage, were actually trapped in this region.
Yeah, more like 90%.
Or 90%.
Yeah.
And the interesting part is that they have more trappers now. I know the young guy that they have as a trapper for Woodlands, and they're in good hands. He's a very dedicated young man, so yeah, it was a really good eye opener.
Well, and one of the questions we asked as a board to the lady the lady from that she represented the government, and with respect to the trapping program. And so the question was posed, considering that those boars are considered a pest and municipalities are charged with controlling the pest, what rights do landowners have? You know, are landowners able to say, no, you can't come on the land even though a pest has been identified? So there's some information that we need to gather because we may have to work with those trappers to facilitate conversations with landowners. So that information will be coming back to, probably to our Ag Service Board first, and then we'll share that with council.
Any other questions for Councillor Keen? Councillor Wilhelm?
As I mentioned, Hound Lowdown, Anthony Gordon Golf Tournament, which was, both events were awesome, as they are every year. I was attending for Infotech, so my normal job, but at MLA Longs Tournament. Really awesome tournament. There was, I think, 5 ministers there, and Premier Smith was there for 6 hours. She came at 9 o'clock in the morning and stayed till 3 p.m. and a lot of FaceTime there, so yeah, I got to talk to her for a little bit, but I also got to golf with Minister Lowen, which was a good day. I've never met him before, and he was pretty fun to hang out with. Had a good team. Had Councillor Marco Hodenberg, I believe, from Grand Cache, and Karen Rosewall from the RMA. She was on our team as well, so we had a lot of fun there. Last night we had the Whitecourt Community Services Board meeting, first one since the summertime. We had Whitecourt Woodlands Rec Park Society do a presentation. It was in camera, so I can't share what they presented, but I did request them to contact Heather to do the presentation for our Community Services Board as well. They've got some interesting information of stuff happening this fall and should be shared with council and the committee. And then that board is going into strategic planning for the fall. So we're in October, we have a strategic planning meeting for the Community Services Board, which will then carry over our directives, or our suggestions to the Town of Whitecourt's budget planning in this fall. So some busy stuff with them. And other than that, I didn't do anything else.
Any other questions for Councillor Wilhelm? Councillor Dean?
Sorry, it's not a question, but there's one thing that I omitted. I also attended the Blue Ridge Family Fun Day on Saturday. and Heather Anderson and her team are really to be commended. That was a great event. When I left, it was just about over by the time I left. It was close to 4 o'clock, and they were coming up on 400 visitors. So that, there were canoes there for families to canoe, and they had face painters, and they had an indigenous setup where children could go in and build teepees, and there was bouncy houses and hot dogs, and there was a lot of activities, and everything was free. So it was a great event, and we were lucky. The weather was awesome as well.
Councilor Will?
Question for Councilor Dean. How many hot dogs did you peel that day?
I peeled none, Jeremy.
What? That's our primary role.
But I consumed one.
If it makes you feel any better, I'll get in my report and I'll start with that. I did peel a bunch of hot dogs, just spent a couple hours in the grill.
Good to hear.
Following out, I just, one other thing that they had going on at the Blue Ridge Family Fun Days was Spandy Andy.
Right.
He had some street performers, and the guy going around with a boom box and doing a bunch of dancing and stuff and getting the kids going. It was a really good time. It was a great event, and I left just around 1:30, and there was already well over 200 people in the counter. So it was a great event.
Forgot about that Spandy Andy dude.
He had quite the show going with a bunch of kids right over by the tent there with the barbecue. So it was a good time. Same day, I also had the privilege of attending the Moose Country's ribbon cutting in Whitecourt. Chamber of Commerce was there. We were invited along with the town of Whitecourt. It's passed down generationally from one owner down to the next. So being part of the photo that they took, which actually had 3 generations of their family in it while we were cutting the ribbon, was pretty cool feeling to be part of that. Chamber of Commerce had a breakfast meeting they held this morning. Managed to make it to that for the first half of it anyways, just kind of seeing where the chamber is on a bunch of their budgetaries and where they are and their events that they have coming up, and be able to give an update from the county. It was great to be there and kind of network and talk. And I definitely start early, but there's always lots of coffee at those. Last night had a Woodlands Library Board meeting up in Fort Assiniboine, getting a bunch of their updates from the Blue Ridge Library and the Fort Assiniboine Library over the different programmings and events that they held over the summer. Through the extra grant that we gave them for programming, I believe it was $40,000. They've been running through those, and they've been booked with extra programs multiple times a week right now. They brought somebody on extra to kind of help facilitate the programming, so it wasn't all falling on our librarians, but it's still within their budgets. And she's been to capacity, plus they have somebody else picking up a couple extra hours, one of their librarians in Blue Ridge, to try to help out with some of the needs for the extra programming they've been doing. So it's been absolutely fantastic. Been very well received. They've been very appreciative of the extra funds that they've been able to put through the communities. Everything from small kid programming right up to strictly adult only, like paint nights and other things like that, and different kind of events, just to get more people involved. And the uptake on attendance on them sounds like it's been fantastic. They've started looking at their budget for 2025, and again, year over year, their budget remains fairly static, and they do a fantastic job with providing what they do with the resources that are available and keeping those facilities really, I guess, neat uptake and just, attractive to the communities. One thing that did come out of there that they are going to be looking at their budget, and I'm also wondering if we can maybe take a look and see if we have resources or whatever that might be able to help kind of facilitate or make things a little bit cheaper when they're looking at their capital end, is they want to put a kind of a sign, like a covered kind of enclosed sign in front of the Blue Ridge Library, just in the kind of at the parking lot, for flyers or any programs or events that they can kind of put inside there instead of having them always kind of plastered on the windows. They're just finding at times when you have too many flyers and too many things kind of on the go on the doors and the windows when people are coming in, it just poses a little bit of a problem for sightlines. So it is something I know they want to start taking a look and start seeing what might be available for kind of like one of those little roofed in and closed signs that they can kind of change off and on. But again, I'm not sure if we possibly have any resources or anything that might be able to help them in their budgets where they can maybe do a little bit cheaper as well. Again, not an ask for them, but it was a communication through them, and want to see if we can help out the group. The Anthony Gordon, I guess the only other thing I want to say about the golf tournament, given it was the final one, the hole where we were driving in heels there, a couple of Jeremy's best hits off the tee was wearing those heels, so fantastic job, great to see, and we got some pictures out on that. ASB meeting, I think everything was covered. The only thing that wasn't covered, we were talking about with in regards to wild boar is, and the group that was there also mentioned it, is trying to find a way for the province to look at things and draw the parallel between the wild boar and the rat program. And the fact that we have all these extra resources from the province that are handed to the municipalities and the trappers and stuff to keep that eastern border, from being invaded and kind of overrun by the rats, and the resources that are dumped into that. And the parallel between that and the hog is very similar if the population gets out of control for not only the rural side and the producers, but in some places where they've had them south of the border where it's ended up an issue in the smaller urban centers as well. So again, they're working on it that end, but again, it is a good parallel to kind of look at them. I know it's a different sized animal, but it's very destructive and aggressive and can do immense damage to the countryside. I guess the only a couple other things. One, I didn't make the meeting, but RMA Insurance came out and did a presentation on Blue Ridge for the our halls. So I kind of come in and talk about their insurance and the level of. They're looking for clarification on a lot of kind of what the policy covers, what it doesn't cover versus the contracts they have. And I've had members from, actually, I talked to 3 different halls now between Blue Ridge, Florida, Cinnamon, and Anselmo, and they all left more confused than when they went in. So part of that also is, I guess, with the way that our rental agreements and contracts and the way that we've been running the facilities, and even in comparison with, say, Diamond Center and Mayerthorpe and stuff, that's again out of our network and kind of a different facility, but again, all the rental agreements seem to be fairly consistent with each other. And my understanding from the conversations from our halls is that basically they're not to the standard that RMA Insurance is needing, and there's going to have to be a lot of re-evaluation and looks at what our halls are actually putting out in their rental agreements before they really start going for a lot of it. And there could be a lot higher cost to any of the renters looking at utilizing their facilities to be able to meet the demands from the RMA Insurance end. So, and again, I wasn't part of the conversation, but this is something that's come out as a point of concern from a few different members after that meeting. So, not sure, again, not really sure where to kind of go or talk to this, but maybe as you can look in your end and see. I don't know.
I can certainly talk to them about it. I guess, and part of it is, so this is ANIs, right? Additionally named insured?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So there's some weird structuring around ANIs as to ownership of buildings and who's operating and that kind of thing. I kind of get the feeling that's what they're running into, is who owns it, who operates it, so I need more clarification.
Yeah, we'll say for, just an example that we gave was, we'll say with, if you rent a hall for, say, an event, and you utilize, say, an AGLC permit for liquor, your insurance rates, they said, are going to be dependent on, even though you have your AGLC permit, who's serving, how it's being served, what's there, how many people, what type of event, it's a whole extra checklist of, we'll say, kind of boxes they got to go through with any renters that are coming in, and some of those extra boxes, even with having, say, an AGLC permit for a liquor, whatever, for a wedding, if it's a community member, a hall member, different, just whoever's kind of serving, it can affect and cause different rates as per the insurance that's required for the rental. And it just, the structure of it's not as kind of black and white and, as it was before with, check a box, is there gonna be liquor? Yes. Is this your permit? Yes. And then, here's what's required. It just, there's a lot more boxes and stuff that are available, and for some of the halls, and especially when the other side, when they're having a rental and they're trying to get this stuff in, it's a lot more steps and a lot more that they're gonna have to try to work through with the potential renters, and they're afraid that some of it might be, may make things a little bit harder to rent and to be able to use.
Okay.
And with some of the hall, the rentals are a big part of their viability.
Yeah.
And those were just some of the concerns that were brought up.
I can certainly have conversations further on that. I get the feeling it's a little bit because of the more litigious society that we're living in right now that they're
Yeah.
kind of putting these things in, but I'll see if there's anything we can do.
And lastly, I had just a quick lunch with Martin Long about a week ago. Just sat down and kind of discussed. I tried bringing up some of the things around the airport. He said, unfortunately, he's not sure. It's not his, as far as the STIP funding is out of his department. We had some discussions around the hospital for the region. I didn't realize, and this also came up at the JUPA meeting and at an industry breakfast meeting I went to as well, I forgot to mention. But it sounds like there's been a needs assessment study for the area that has been kind of missed, or a portion of that's been missed through this process so far, which has kind of been putting our area on the back burner a little bit more and a little bit more. He says now that that's been kind of addressed and underway, it'll help kind of move the needle on that a little bit more. But as far as any type of new facility, if anything ever goes that route, he said they're looking 10 to 15 years out anyways. So it's a long process, but at least we're kind of finding some of the missing loopholes. And then the last one, the industry breakfast I was at, a bunch of Canfor was there, I think Blue Ridge Lumber was there, ANC was there. Talking about a lot of the uncertainties right now, especially with the trade disputes back and forth between Canada and the US on the softwood side. They're finding it's getting to be extremely expensive to move lumber from this way south to the point where I believe it was Canfor was actually discussing it. They said that some of the areas down in the southern parts of the States, they've been buying lumber from Europe and shipping it over, and it's more cost effective than rail from here down. So a little alarming when you hear, it's cheaper to put something in a boat across the ocean than on a direct line that's over here. And that's what I got. Any questions? Anything else? Not seeing any. If I can get a motion for 11-1. Councilor Dean, your hand was up the first, right?
I move that we accept council reports as information.
Thank you, Councilor. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. 11.2 Corporate Services Report.
Could I ask for a 5-minute bio break?
Yes. We got the older councilor in the corner needs a break. It's just about 7:20. Say 7:35.
That's fine. Well, I know I'm older than you.
If you want to let us know, we'll break till 7:35. Okay, we're back. Start with 11.2 Corporate Services Report. Denisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So before council, today is a summary of our expenses to date on July 31st. And a new designed statement of operations, just laying out a format that is similar to the presentation on the audited financial statement. The report also give council clarity on which expenditures are, or which expenses are cash-driven expenses and which are non-cash driven expenses, and separation of where capital fundings are, so that we can see the, looking at this one, we can see the report, how our operations is being impacted by the revenues that are coming in. So when we look at the expenses before other transactions, that line there give us a, go ahead. Oh, I thought you were thinking something.
Nope.
Okay, yeah, so the line expenses before other transactions, those expenses are what we're paying cash for in our operations. And the line just below that, revenue deficit over expenses, gives us indication of what our current operations, based on our revenues, are funding. Just to also clarify, the report is sort of split. There's a line in the middle that shows the operating side and the capital side, just to have one report instead of having two of the same reports. So we have one report, this report that is breaking down by the overall department that we have, and then we have another report that breaks down based on the major category of expenses that I think we have. So some of these lines are in the auditor's financial statement, but some are in ours. It's more detailed here, a little bit more breakdown of the major category of expenses. Just looking at the numbers, I had highlighted few revenue and expenses based on budget to actual for 2023, where so overall we budgeted our revenue at $500K higher than what our 2023 actuals were, and that was, you could say, representative of the fact that the assessment base kind of stabilized between the increases that we saw in the 2 years prior, with just the market increased and the budget. We did not change our mill rates from the county level. So then our our income overall there would be in line when all things are considered. So overall, just a small increase in budgeted numbers. Our expenses over actual went up, and so that impacts how much revenue we then have left over, all things being equal. If we were to get all our revenues and spend as we had budgeted, the amount of money we have left over to contribute to other projects, meaning our capital projects or reserve funding, is about 50% less. One of the questions our Reeve was alluded to earlier was, where is our equipment reserve? And we will work on providing that information, but just on a highlighted level, we transferred $1 million roughly from last year's budget into equipment reserve, and so it's $1,012,000, and we transferred some $3.5 million into current year capital projects. Most of that money will be carried over into 2025 because a lot of our capital project has been postponed going forward, so that money will be moving forward also. And then we transferred $2.2 million into general working capital that we can draw from in emergency situations.
Sorry, go ahead, Al.
I just had one question. So under the statement of operations where the expenses by categories
Yeah.
are listed,
Yeah.
there's a significant year-over-year, well, the ops budget versus 23 actual in contracted and general services.
Right.
So we're looking at a little over $2 million difference there. What accounted for that $2 million? What were the big numbers involved there?
Okay, I don't have that right off
And you can.
hand.
you
And I
send
can,
that.
I can get back to you
Sounds
with
good.
details.
The other big number
Look
that
at it.
accounted for that 4 million was in salaries and wages, but the contract and general services, I just didn't
Yeah, yeah, I can get that,
understand
get
that.
that to you very easily, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And just gonna see what else I want to highlight from our report. And I think overall, I mean, if the council has any additional question, if you have gone to the report and have any additional questions there, I can feel that immediately.
Any other questions from council? Council Rose?
Just one thing, I gotta find it again in your report, but there's a mention in there about budgeted reserves versus
Okay, yes,
cash reserves, and
that's on the last page.
it was, oh man, I got too many windows open, I'm sorry. There we go. There was a note in the beginning here. Budgeted reserves versus cash in bank. I want to highlight the regarded budget reserves. It doesn't necessarily mean the cash is in the bank. Do we have, is there a different mechanism of reporting that we actually can request where we have cash in bank on? And I don't think we've necessarily set up those reserves yet, but is that a goal that we're working towards?
So
Through the chair.
Through the chair, to Councilor Burrows. So yes, so we are tracking what we have as budget, as reserve right now, and we'll be presenting that information to the council. So I've already started prepping that template and getting that information. It just wasn't ready for this meeting. And so what I wanted was to share here is, for example, this year we have a year of different asks that came to council, and with the infrastructure and all the things that Jeff were finding. So we might have budgeted to say like the $2.2 million for general working capital reserve, but because of everything that happened, we don't know if we're going to collect all our revenues that we had budgeted. So when all of that happens, and at the end of the year, we might not actually have that money remaining to transfer. We might have actually spent more than what because of all those asks. And if we hadn't collected all our revenues, or if our revenues didn't come in as we expected, right? So we have that allowance of that doubtful amount. So we are mindful of that, and we want to ensure that if we didn't make our reserve as council has budgeted, so based on what we had in reserve at the beginning of the year and the amounts that council took out for different projects and added in, we went from like, say 17.5 down to 17 with the net of all of that. But that's the budgeted. Now, if for the year everything comes together and we still have enough to make that 2.2, we will make that budgeted end reserve that council had. But if we didn't, then we're going to be under, depending on how things go. And it becomes whether or not we're committed to actually meeting those dollar amounts for the next budget year. We may have to increase our reserve to keep it on pace to where we want it to be. So it's not a matter of setting the budgeted reserve and just leaving it and not going back and revisiting and say, did we meet that expectation that council wanted to be in the reserve fund?
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments from council? Not seeing any. Somebody want to move the report for information? Councilor Burrows.
I'll make a motion that council accepts the September 2024 corporate services report as information.
Thank you. With that, any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any. Call the question. All in favor? And brings us down to 11.3. Mr. Benedetto.
Mr. Reven, members of council, the one issue that I want to spend a little bit of time on at the start of the report, and there are others, due to the significance of the concerns are with respect to our roads. And certainly looking at the service tracker, and you as council members have represented a number of the concerns regarding roads. And because we dealt with a number of the initiatives that have come forward over a series of meetings, it's sometimes important to step back and see the whole picture of where we were and where we are going. And so it started at the June 5th council meeting, and you had approved a pilot program to increase the level of service on selected roads. And these were increased level of grading for a selected number of roads. And I'm sure you know most of these off by heart. And really, as we go through this report, you'll see there's been a number of innovative and changes tried and brought forward to really work toward bringing some improvement to our current situation. It's not a matter where there's quick fixes, because there's been a cutback in maintenance for several years and it's had an impact, but certainly making progress is important. So that pilot enhanced grading program with a contract grader was Range Road 120, Range Road 121, Township Road 585, 590, 114A, 114B, Range Road 121, Range Road 121, Tower Road from 591A to Township Road 592B, Township Road 590 from Highway 32 to the western end, approximately 2.4 kilometers, and Range Road 130, known as Horn Road, from Township 594 north, approximately 2.4 kilometers. The pilot program was implemented very efficiently shortly after your approval on June 5th, on June the 10th. And then at the July 17th meeting, there was a pilot program suggested for the Westridge subdivision, and your approval was granted for modified cold mix in place recycling and some stabilization. And then you further looked at another pilot road program, the Gibson subdivision, and again approved some modified restoration of the cold mix in place and some stabilization. Our contractor, Cortec, is planning to commence the subdivision rehabilitation work, recycling the existing cold mix with additional gravel, injected calcium chloride, magnesium hydroxide mixture to bind particles together on about September 17th, and is indicating to Jeff that both subdivisions, weather permitting and no equipment breakdowns, should be completed by September 25th, which I think would be welcome news for many people. And billboards have been installed, and we had emailed you as well saying that we're going out alerting our citizens to the startup of that work. Now, we also, council asked for an update and evaluation of the pilot road program for the gravel at August 14th council meeting. And although there are still, some concerns based on the service tracker, there were reduced number of issues registered relative to some of those specific roads. Additionally, this past week, another pilot was initiated in Range Road 120 by using an integrated grading, watering, and road packing approach. The results of this approach as a pilot will be monitored for effectiveness, as this is a higher standard and has additional cost. Now, still very early, and went out with Jeff on a tour the other evening, and before, when we graded them, within a day they are back to washboard, and certainly at this stage, although it's still early, that road is in better shape than it was, and now the question will be monitoring how long it stands up. The other thing that's important as well is to understand where we stand with our available budget. And due to the council approvals, et cetera, the budget that we had available has been fully allocated to try and upgrade and make some improvements to these roads. And just to recap those costs, the Gibson and Westridge subdivisions for the work that I had talked to is a combined total cost of $300,000. Township Road 592 to restore a cold mix driving surface at a total cost of $100,000. And then we're all looking forward to the recommendations coming from the consultants that are reviewing our cold mix roads and evaluating them in terms of developing some longer-term recommendations so that we take a very thorough approach to addressing the issues that we're trying to manage. And that's about in the neighborhood of $200,000. So again, there's been a lot of work, and I really commend Jeff and his team in terms of the number of new initiatives they brought forward and new approaches and their pilots. And we're carefully monitoring those outcomes. And the work has been organized and the budget fully committed to do some upgrades, primarily in those main subdivisions, which are heavily traveled roads due to the population density. So at this stage, once we get the contractor's work completed, we will have fully implemented the road program for 2024 based on our resources and the available budget. And so, you know, we've got a lot of work to do yet, but certainly there's been a lot of positive progress to try to start to find some better methods and more effective solutions to some of the road issues that we are experiencing. Jeff, I don't know if you had anything else to add or if there are questions on that, but I think it was important to step back because these approvals happened over a number of meetings to look at the whole program and where we were and what's been implemented over this summer with the work yet to be completed by our contractor to drive some improvements to the quality of our roads.
Any questions, comments? Councillor Coogan?
Yeah, you may want to redirect this to Jeff, but I noticed even in our area that even though the maintenance has been the same as it has been for years, the washboarding is more because my question would be, does weather have something to do with that? Because it seems like there's a deeper layer of gravel there now, and it doesn't seem to want to compact at all. I noticed that on Range Road 70 that when they grade that, when it's damp, and then it gets traveled, it stays really well packed for a long time. But eventually the dry weather will recreate the washboard.
Yeah, Jeff is doing a lot of work with our grader operators and people, so I'll ask him to comment on that further.
Through the chair to Councillor Cookan, we need a little bit moisture to grade. When it's a warm spell of 30 degrees and like our August here with no rain, we can't make magic. In the forthcoming budget, we will be putting forward some suggestions of purchasing some sort of a water delivery mechanism to be able to deal with road grading during those hot spells. Those are necessary in order to provide a better service. We are also renting a handy hinge packer. It's basically an attachment that you attach on the back of a grader. Luxembourg County use it, and their staff says it's a very good innovation, and we're going to rent one and give it a try. Any type of civil work with a bit of compaction is always a plus, and that is a attachment to a grader, not a tow behind unit. To your point, when the weather is hot and we don't have moisture, it's nearly impossible to cut the washboards without the introduction of moisture.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Wilhelm?
Just through the chair to administration, I just want to say thank you for looking at new solutions. You guys have me pass on the frustrations of the residents that are in the areas and also my own because I drive on some of the roads as well. And I do commend you guys' open-mindedness to trying new things to try to solve these long-term issues. So thank you for that.
Anything else from council? Mr. Bonanno, is that,
I got more.
okay?
I don't know if that's good or bad news. Another road issue that we're dealing with, of course, severe damage to, locally, I believe it's referred to as the old Ferry Loop Road, damage through some of the unfortunate floods that occurred. And Jeff has been having some individual meetings with the residents to kind of make sure they understand what the options are and kind of get some of their feedback. In camera, we'll talk a little bit more detail on what some of that feedback has been, but that is work in progress yet. And another initiative that we have is the service level project. It's well underway, and it's going to take some additional time, as not all the departments have been able to complete the development of their service levels. We've asked the consultant to provide some drafts and things and, really try to facilitate the process as much as possible to help the departments, because there's a lot of commonality if you're maintaining rural roads in Woodlands County or somewhere else. So that's taken us a little bit more time, but that becomes an important part of the budget consideration. So you're linking the dollars and expenditures to service levels and programs that the community can expect, and then we've got a clear authorization from council as well. So it's important work, but we're having to try to balance it with preparing budgets and a whole bunch of other initiatives. So we'll get back to you with that as soon as we can. In terms of the ongoing work of asset management and using information technology, the work is continuing to assess the condition of our assets, and we're hoping to get to the point where that will do a lot of the informing of the 5-year capital budget based on the infrastructure we have, the priorities, and based on the condition assessment. I alluded to this in an earlier discussion. And we've gone through as a senior management team and the management group a draft corporate planning cycle, and we've incorporated the input, also worked with Denisha to link the timing and the linkage with the financial management to fit in with the overall fiscal management program. And we will be bringing that for your information at the October 9th council meeting. And the other adjustments we've had to make because of the workload concerns is it will take about a 24-month to address the full implementation, but at least it sets the desired state that we are working towards, and we look forward to that discussion with you on October the 9th. The next area is the Whitecourt Regional Solid Waste Management Authority, and the August meeting, their plans have been authorized to move forward with the failing scale replacement and the house, I don't know, we call it the guard house, what do you call it there? The facility that's there. Scale house, guard house, I'm thinking of a jail, I guess. And we also have forward, as discussed with council, the assessment from our legal counsel to the town, and that's helping facilitate further discussions at the authority. The next, health and safety. It's always important, and we are gearing up for the health and safety audit program and the evaluation. And I mean, that is just so important because, that's really, I like to refer to it in layperson terms as that's our toolbox to keep our workforce safe and our work family safe. And the other thing that there is a rigorous criteria that they have in terms of the audit tool. And the other part is that you better have your house in order because you have to have an overall score of 80% to continue to be qualified and certified under the AMPSA program. So we are working toward that, and the interviews will be commencing. The health and safety policy is being updated and refreshed and re-signed. And the good news to this point is that we have, in this fiscal year so far, had no lost time incidences, and hopefully that's something that can continue because it's just so important to have a safe work environment. The other thing, it was reported to council in an earlier meeting that the airport was planning their disaster exercise to be compliant and make sure that those are always good learning exercises and a good refresher for everybody. So the date of that has now been established, and that will be occurring on the 24th of this month. So now that that's moved forward, we wanted to share that with council. So with that, I'd respond to any other questions that you have, Mr. Reeve, or any of the members of council.
Council? I'm not seeing any, got anything further? Mr. Benedetto? or we-
That concludes my report for the public portion.
Council Rose?
I would just make a motion that we accept the CAO report as information.
Thank you. Motion on the floor, I'll call the question, all in favor? That's carried. It brings us down to our closed meeting portion. If I can get a motion to Councillor Cokin.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we go into closed session under foot 17 and foot 21.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Motion on the floor to go to closed session. Call the question, all in favor? That is carried. Close the door. Thanks, Jeff. Just let us know when we're offline there to keep. In a closed session, you got a couple motions here. We'll start with 12.2, ICF discussion. Motion one was Councillor Cokin.
Yeah, I make a motion that council accept the inter-municipal collaboration framework as for information.
It's been a long day. It's been a long day. Motion on the floor. Call the question, all in favor? That's carried. Motion two was Jeremy.
I'll make a motion that council send a letter to the town of Whitecourt Council requesting a joint liaison meeting to discuss the finalization of the inter-municipal collaboration framework agreement.
Thank you, Councillor. Call the question, all in favor? That's carried. 12.3, Old Ferry Loop. Councillor Rose.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that council accepts the Old Ferry Road update as information.
Thank you, Councillor. Call the question, all in favor? That's carried. 12.4, Town of Lakewood Community Fire Guard Project. That's Councillor Dean.
I move that council directs administration to provide a letter of support to the town of Whitecourt for the community fire guard project.
Thank you, Councillor. Call the question, all in favor? That one's carried. 12.5, Councillor Wilhelm.
I'll make a motion that council accepts the CAO report as information.
Thank you. That'll call the question. All in favor? Last one, Councillor Burrows.
Motion to adjourn.
Yay. Motion to adjourn. Call the question, all in favor? And we are adjourned at 12:09.
Boy.